I really need some outside perspective because honestly, I'm starting to feel like I'm losing it. Everyone keeps saying I'm overreacting, but this whole thing has been messing with my head. I don't know if I'm the one in the wrong here, but it's been eating away at me and I have no one else I can talk to. I met Jake around 4 years ago at my cousin's birthday party. He was hilarious, super charming, and we clicked instantly. We started dating pretty quickly after that, and the relationship took off fast. He was always the center of attention, cracking jokes and keeping the energy up wherever we went. At first, I genuinely loved that about him, how he could instantly make people feel comfortable and light up a room. After about 3 years together, he proposed during a trip we took to this quiet little beach town. It wasn't some big spectacle, just a nice dinner followed by a walk along the sand where he got down on one knee. I said yes right away. I was thrilled and couldn't wait to start building a life with him. Now, looking back, I can see the warning signs that I ignored. Jake had this habit of pushing jokes a little too far. Like the time we went to his friend's birthday and Jake smashed the guy's face into his own cake. Everyone laughed, but it was obvious the birthday guy was embarrassed. Or when he swapped out his mom's sugar for salt on April Fool's Day and ruined a whole batch of cookies she had made for a church event. She was furious, but Jake just laughed it off. I always chalked it up to him being playful, and he would always apologize if someone genuinely got upset. He'd say things like, "I was just trying to get a laugh," or "Come on, don't be so serious, it's just a joke." And I believed him. I figured he meant well, even if he got carried away now and then. Things started to take a weird turn a few months before our wedding. I noticed Jake constantly glued to his phone, watching these ridiculous prank videos. He'd be dying of laughter watching brides get cake in the face, awkward photos of them shown during speeches, grooms pretending to bolt from the altar, you name it. One night, he kept showing me these clips while we were sitting on the couch, and I just sat there stone-faced. I wasn't amused at all. Right then, I told him straight up that I didn't want any of that crap at our wedding. I made it very clear I'd spent a lot of money on my dress and makeup, and I didn't want anything ruining them. I also said that humiliating your spouse in front of a room full of guests was not the best way to kick off a marriage. He laughed and said, "Relax, babe, I'm not planning anything. I know you're too uptight for that kind of thing." That uptight comment bugged me, but I let it go because at least he claimed he wasn't planning anything. I took him at his word. But then things started to feel off. I'd walk into the room and he'd end phone calls with his friends really fast. He kept acting all secretive and changing the subject whenever I asked what he was up to. For a second, I actually thought maybe he was planning a surprise honeymoon or something sweet. Out of nowhere, he suddenly started showing interest in wedding stuff he hadn't cared about at all before. He got super invested in picking the cake and even the photographer. I was surprised, but honestly, I thought maybe he was finally stepping up and getting serious about the whole thing. It actually made me happy to see him engaged in the planning. Then things started getting weirder. One night at dinner with his best friend Tom and Tom's girlfriend, Tom made some weird jokes about how this wedding would be one for the books and something nobody would forget. He and Jake kept exchanging these looks and chuckling, and Jake even kicked him under the table at one point. When I asked what they were talking about, they just shrugged and said it was an inside joke. Another red flag popped up during the cake tasting. Jake kept asking the baker these really bizarre questions, like how much weight the frosting could handle and how sturdy the cake layers were. The baker looked totally confused, and I just figured Jake didn't know much about cakes. He was also super specific about wanting a thick type of frosting because he said it would look better in photos. Again, I was just happy he was involved, so I didn't overthink it. Then, about 2 weeks before the wedding, his brother Frank came over for dinner. Frank is nothing like Jake, quiet, serious, and thoughtful. While we were chatting about the wedding, Frank asked if we were doing any special traditions. Before I could answer, Jake jumped in with something like, "Oh, we've got a special surprise planned," and gave Frank this exaggerated wink. Frank didn't look amused at all. He asked Jake what he meant, and Jake just brushed it off. But Frank shot him this look long and intense that I didn't really get at the time. The night before the wedding, I couldn't shake this awful gut feeling. Something just felt wrong. I pulled Jake aside after the rehearsal dinner and looked him in the eye. I told him again that if he did anything stupid, like a prank that would ruin my appearance or humiliate me, I'd seriously rethink this whole relationship. He got defensive right away. Told me I was paranoid, reminded me he already said he wasn't doing anything, and made me feel guilty like I was ruining our vibe before the big day. I felt bad for doubting him, but turns out, I should have trusted my instincts. The morning of the wedding was a whirlwind, but everything was going smoothly. My bridesmaids and mom helped me get ready. The makeup artist spent nearly 2 hours on my face, and when I looked in the mirror, I honestly felt beautiful. My dress fit perfectly. It had taken months of saving and 3 fittings to get it just right. Everyone kept saying how gorgeous I looked, and I couldn't wait to see the look on Jake's face when I walked down the aisle. The ceremony itself was perfect. Jake looked incredible in his tux, and when he saw me, he actually teared up. That made me cry, too. We exchanged vows, slipped on our rings, and kissed. It all felt magical. In that moment, I thought maybe I'd been overthinking everything. But then the reception started. At first, it was great. We had our first dance, the speeches were heartfelt, though Tom's toast included a few offhand remarks about Jake's sense of humor that made me uneasy. The food was fantastic. Then came the cake cutting. The cake was stunning, 3 tiers, white fondant, and delicate sugar flowers that matched my bouquet. Everyone gathered around as Jake and I picked up the knife together for that picture-perfect moment. The photographer was right in front of us, ready to capture it all. We made the first slice, and the crowd cheered. I was grinning so hard my face hurt. Then it happened. I was about to feed Jake a small piece of cake when I suddenly felt his hand grab the back of my head. Before I could react, he shoved my face full force into the cake. Not a playful nudge, he slammed my whole face into it. My makeup was destroyed. I had frosting smeared across my face, stuck in my hair, and dripping down the front of my dress. And the worst part? The entire room burst into laughter. Jake was laughing the hardest, with his arm around me like it was all just hilarious. The photographer kept snapping away while Jake joked, "This'll be our wedding photo." I just stood there, completely stunned, like my brain couldn't catch up with what had just happened. So I turned around and slapped him hard. The sound echoed louder than the DJ's music. Everyone froze. The laughter stopped on a dime. Jake stood there stunned, blinking at me like he couldn't believe I'd actually done it. His cheek was already turning red from the hit. Tears were already pouring down my face, mixing with frosting as I shouted, "What is wrong with you? I explicitly told you not to do this." His face twisted from surprise to irritation in seconds. "Relax, babe. It was just a joke," he said, waving it off like I was the one acting crazy. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. You're making a scene." That's when I snapped. I shoved past people, guests who had been laughing seconds ago now awkwardly standing around not knowing where to look. I heard my mom calling after me, but I didn't turn back. I just kept going until I reached the bridal suite. Once inside, I slammed the door shut and locked it behind me like I was trying to keep the whole world out. I stood in front of the mirror and nearly recoiled. The reflection didn't even look like me. My makeup was destroyed, streaks of mascara mixed with chunks of frosting on my cheeks. My hair, which had taken hours to style that morning, now looked like a matted mess of curls and sugar. And my dress, my dream dress, the one I'd saved months for, hunted endlessly to find, and altered to perfection, it had a massive frosting stain right down the front. I knew just by looking at it that the damage was permanent. I tried to clean up, but it was no use. My makeup was unsalvageable, and no matter how much I tried to wipe or fix my hair, I still looked like a walking disaster. I was shaking, furious, humiliated, and heartbroken all at once. How could he do this to me? After I begged him not to? After he promised? I must have stayed locked in that room for 20, maybe 30 minutes, when I started hearing shouting coming from the reception hall. At first, I tuned it out. But it got louder. And then I realized one of the voices was Frank's. Jake's brother. The quiet one who never raised his voice, who barely ever spoke above a low murmur. I cracked the door just a sliver and listened. I couldn't see anything from where I was, but I could hear Frank shouting, "You never change," and, "You swore you wouldn't pull this crap today." The more I heard, the more stunned I became. Frank wasn't just upset, he was furious. And not just at the situation, but at Jake. Eventually, the yelling died down. Then someone knocked at the door. It was Frank. His face was flushed, his jaw tense, and he looked more upset than I'd ever seen him. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. I just shook my head. I didn't trust my voice not to crack if I tried to speak. "Jake wants to say something," he added, still clenching his jaw. "If you're up for it." I didn't want to see Jake. Not even a little. But I gave Frank a small nod. He left, and a moment later came back with Jake walking behind him, eyes on the floor like a guilty teenager. Frank looked him dead in the eye. "Look at her." Jake hesitated, then slowly raised his eyes. "I'm sorry," he muttered, barely above a whisper. Frank didn't let that slide. "Look at her when you say it." Jake straightened up slightly and finally faced me. "I'm sorry, okay? I didn't think you'd freak out like this. It was supposed to be funny." And that was it. That's all he had to say. I stared at him, and for the first time in 4 years, I felt like I was seeing him clearly. There was no real remorse in his voice. No regret. He wasn't sorry that he hurt me, he was sorry I didn't laugh along. That Frank was mad. That people were uncomfortable. But not that he'd completely humiliated me in front of every single person we know. That realization hit me hard. I had married a man who cared more about pulling a joke than respecting me. And worse, he didn't even understand why I was upset. What made it even more surreal was Frank. In all the time I'd known him, he was calm, soft-spoken, the type who let things roll off his back. But tonight? He was red-faced and practically vibrating with anger. It was like watching a different person entirely. And weirdly, that's what made it real. If Frank was this mad, then yeah, this wasn't just me being sensitive. Frank walked us both back into the reception hall. You could have heard a pin drop. People were sitting stiffly, eyes glued to their plates or nursing their drinks like they were the most fascinating things in the world. Some were whispering, pretending not to stare. The DJ tried to lift the mood with an upbeat song, but it fell flat. The energy in the room was gone. I sat at our table, barely touching my plate. I couldn't bring myself to make eye contact with anyone. Jake, meanwhile, acted like nothing had happened. He laughed with his buddies, made small talk, even tried putting his arm around me a few times like we were just having a normal evening. Like I hadn't been shoved face-first into a cake he chose and planned specifically for that purpose. I felt humiliated. I felt betrayed. I felt alone. The rest of the night dragged on. People started making excuses to leave early: headaches, early flights, tired kids, whatever they could say to escape the awkward tension. By 10 o'clock, the hall was nearly empty, even though we'd planned to keep the party going until midnight. I couldn't even look at Jake anymore. So when Frank offered to give me a ride home, I didn't hesitate. Jake didn't try to stop me, probably because Frank was still throwing daggers at him with his eyes every time he moved. The ride was mostly quiet. I stared out the window, still feeling like I was trapped in some awful dream. Then Frank finally broke the silence. "I'm really sorry," he said, keeping his eyes on the road. "And not just about what happened, but for losing it back there. I'm not usually like that. It's just, I've seen this too many times." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" He sighed. A heavy, tired kind of sigh. "Jake's always been this way. He loves getting a rise out of people, especially when he can do it in front of a crowd. He thinks it's funny. It's always been that way." Then he started telling me stories, stuff I'd never heard before. Like how Jake used to throw cake at him during his birthdays, or how he once broke Frank's favorite gift on purpose because he thought it'd be hilarious. One year, Jake switched out Frank's graduation gown for one that didn't fit, and Frank had to scramble at the last second to find something to wear. And every time, their parents just brushed it off as boys being boys. "He's been doing this his whole life," Frank said. "I've been putting up with it for as long as I can remember. But tonight? Watching him do that to you? That was too much." That's when I realized he's not just immature, he's cruel. He enjoys humiliating people. Then he looked at me and said, "I should have warned you. I've seen how he treats people. I've seen how he's treated you, honestly. But I kept hoping maybe he'd grow out of it. I never thought he'd do this on his wedding day." "You're not to blame," I told him quietly. "I should have seen it for myself. I just didn't want to believe it." We sat in silence for a bit. Then I asked the question that had been spinning in my head ever since my face hit the cake. Would I be overreacting if I left him over this? Frank didn't miss a beat. "No. Not at all. You deserve better than someone who thinks embarrassing you in front of a room full of people is funny. I don't care how Jake feels, he did this to himself." Before I got out of the car, Frank told me he'd help me pack my things if I decided to leave. He gave me his number and told me I could reach out anytime. It was the first time since the whole disaster that I felt like someone was truly in my corner. That night, I stayed in the apartment alone. Jake messaged me over and over, asking why I didn't come to the hotel. We were supposed to spend our wedding night there before flying out for our honeymoon. I didn't reply. By the time the sun rose, I knew what I had to do. I texted him, "I want a divorce." He replied almost immediately, "Are you serious? Over a cake? Don't be ridiculous." I left him on read. And then the flood of messages started, from his side and even from mine. His mom called me dramatic, said it was just a harmless wedding tradition. His sister texted to say I was too uptight and needed to learn to take a joke. And then, most painfully, even my own parents told me I was making a mistake. People kept telling me things like, "Every marriage hits a rough patch," or "Don't throw it all away over one incident." But here's the truth, this was never just about cake. It wasn't about frosting or jokes. It was about the fact that I made a boundary crystal clear multiple times, and Jake not only ignored it, but made a whole scene out of crossing it in front of everyone we know, on one of the most important days of my life. How am I supposed to trust him with anything moving forward when he could lie to my face about something so basic? If he can't respect one simple, repeated request, what else will he brush off in the future? What promises will he break next? And if we ever had kids, would he find it hilarious to humiliate them too? And the worst part, when I told him how hurt I was, he didn't reflect, didn't apologize. He told me I was the one with the problem because I didn't laugh along with him while he humiliated me. The day after the wedding, Jake came back to our apartment like nothing had happened. He acted like we were just going to pick up where we left off, as if I hadn't walked out on him with tears and frosting on my face. When I told him I was serious about getting a divorce, he flipped. He called me ungrateful. Said I had no sense of humor and that I was ruining his life over a stupid prank. He didn't once try to understand how I felt. That night, I packed a bag and stayed at my best friend Megan's place. I couldn't be in the same space as him. Megan was the first person who really got it. I told her everything, and instead of minimizing it or brushing it off like others had, she looked me in the eye and said, "It's not about the cake. It's about how little he cares about your feelings." And that was exactly it. The only other person who seems to genuinely support my decision is Jake's brother, Frank. I've officially decided to go through with ending the marriage. Whether it's a divorce or annulment someone mentioned that might be possible since it's only been a couple of days, I'm moving forward. Update. Honestly, I didn't expect this whole situation to blow up the way it did. I've been overwhelmed by the number of responses and support from people online. I haven't replied to many comments, partly because I've been emotionally drained and trying to wrap my head around everything, but I've read them all. And I can't tell you how much it's helped to realize I'm not crazy for feeling betrayed. A lot of people mentioned that an annulment might be easier than a divorce considering how fresh the marriage is. I hadn't thought about that before, probably because my brain has been in survival mode. But that's the plan now. I spoke with a lawyer friend, and they confirmed that an annulment is likely possible given the circumstances and how short the marriage has been. I haven't filed anything just yet, but I'll be moving forward with it in the next couple of weeks. Thankfully, it should be much more straightforward than a full-on divorce, and honestly, this marriage never felt real to begin with. People also asked what happened to our honeymoon. We were supposed to fly out to Hawaii the day after the wedding, a 2-week trip we'd spent months planning. Obviously, I didn't go. Jake, however, tried to convince me we should still go together, arguing that it was already paid for and we could use the time to work things out. As if I'd want to spend 2 weeks alone with someone who humiliated me in front of our family and friends. I told him he was welcome to go by himself if he really wanted, but he didn't. So now we're stuck trying to cancel and get partial refunds or credit, yet another mess to deal with. Here's what happened next. The day after I made my original post, I went back to what technically was still our apartment to collect my stuff. I had been staying with Megan in the meantime, but I didn't want to leave everything behind. I took Frank up on his offer to help me, which turned out to be a great decision. I was nervous about running into Jake again, but having Frank there made me feel safer, like I had someone in my corner. We showed up around noon, and Jake hadn't expected Frank to be with me. His face said it all, surprise mixed with exhaustion. To be fair, none of us had probably slept much. The moment I walked through the door, Jake started repeating that same tired line, "It was just a prank. I didn't mean to hurt you." He tried to hug me. I backed away. As I started gathering my things, he trailed behind me, constantly talking, "Come on, babe, don't do this. We can talk it out. You're overreacting." But all I could think was, he's already broken one promise. Why would I believe anything else that comes out of his mouth now? When Jake realized that Frank wasn't there to convince me to stay, but was actually helping me pack, he completely lost it. His face turned blotchy, and he started shouting, accusing Frank of brainwashing me, trying to steal me away. Frank, calm as ever, just said, "She made her decision. You did this to yourself." Then they got into it. Full-blown argument. Frank brought up stuff Jake had done to him when they were kids, stories I'd never even heard before. Jake just rolled his eyes and said, "Grow a pair." That was years ago. Which was pretty rich, coming from someone who still acts like he's 13. At one point, Jake actually tried to stop me from leaving with a box of my books, physically blocking the door and telling me we needed to talk like adults. The irony of that coming from him was laughable. Frank stepped in and told him to back off, which only escalated things. I kept packing while they argued, tuning them out as best I could. Jake kept alternating between apologizing, blaming Frank, and accusing me of giving up too easily. Frank, thankfully, ran interference so I could collect what I needed without being cornered or guilt-tripped. It took about 2 hours to get my essentials together. I left a lot behind, things I can come back for or just replace. When we finally left, Jake slammed the door behind us so hard the walls shook. As we walked to the car, I heard something crash inside. He probably threw something across the room. That felt like the final punctuation mark on a relationship that had already fallen apart. Frank helped me unload everything at Megan's place, where I'd been staying the past few days. Later, a mutual friend told me Jake has been going around telling everyone, his family, our friends, that Frank had been secretly trying to steal me from him for years and that this was his big opportunity. It's completely unhinged. Frank and I have always been friendly, sure, but we were never close. We'd make small talk at family events, maybe text once in a blue moon about wedding plans. That's it. The idea that he's been plotting to steal me away this whole time? Totally absurd. Jake's just scrambling to find someone else to blame, because he sure as hell doesn't want to admit that he's the one who ruined it all. If Jake was looking for someone to blame other than himself, my family was all too willing to help. They weren't any better than his, to be honest. I got bombarded with messages telling me not to give up so quickly, that one mistake shouldn't end a whole marriage. My mom even had the audacity to say, every marriage has its problems. You can't just run away at the first sign of trouble. Like getting publicly humiliated by your husband on your wedding day after he promised not to with some normal marital hiccup. They only backed off when I finally snapped and told them I'd cut them off too if they couldn't respect my decision. I said, flat out, that if they couldn't stand by me now, then I didn't need them in my life at all. That finally shut the messages down. It's been about a week since the wedding, and things have finally started to settle. I'm still crashing at Megan's place while I look for a place of my own. Jake has mostly stopped blowing up my phone, though he still sends the occasional pathetic message trying to convince me to reconsider or telling me I'm throwing away something amazing over nothing. I don't respond. I've learned that silence is sometimes the loudest answer. I had a meeting with a lawyer about filing for annulment. She was very clear, save everything, every text, every message, especially the ones where Jake admits what he did. Just in case he tries to fight it or flip the narrative. Frank also offered to give a statement if needed, which I thought was incredibly kind. He's been more supportive than almost anyone else. And speaking of Frank, a lot of you in the comments suggested I should date him. Honestly, I laughed when I first read it. But after reading so many messages implying Frank might have feelings for me, I figured, why not test it? Not to actually start something, but more to see if he had any kind of ulterior motive in helping me. Because frankly, he'd shown me more empathy and respect through this whole mess than my own husband ever had. So, after we dropped off my stuff at Megan's, I awkwardly asked Frank if he wanted to grab coffee sometime, just the two of us. He was super respectful in how he responded. He gently let me know he was already seeing someone, a woman he met at work about 6 months ago. He said he was flattered, but he thought I probably needed some time to heal before jumping into anything new. And that getting involved with him would only make things with Jake even messier, which he's absolutely right. That moment made me respect him even more. It showed me he wasn't helping me for any hidden reason. He was just doing it because he's a good person. We agreed to stay friends, and since then, he's checked in a couple times to make sure I'm okay. No pressure, no weirdness, just genuine kindness. I told Frank about this post, actually. He read through some of the comments and said it made his day. He really appreciated all the love from internet strangers, especially the ones joking that he was secretly in love with me. That got a good laugh out of him. As for what's next, I'm just focusing on myself now. I've gone back to work, only took a couple of days off after everything happened, but couldn't afford much more. I'm actively looking for an apartment and trying to sort through the emotional wreckage of all this. I'm considering starting therapy, not to fix a marriage like my family hoped, but to process the betrayal, the public embarrassment, and the years of brushing off red flags that brought me here. This will probably be my final update. The annulment is officially in progress, and I'm moving forward. I want to put this whole experience behind me and not let it define the rest of my life. Thank you all for the support, it's meant more than you know. Just knowing that there are people out there who get it, who see that this wasn't just about cake, has helped me feel sane again.